Before we finally leave the book of Nehemiah, I would like to make a few comments as to how it fits within the overall story of the Bible. The story of the book of Nehemiah and that of Ezra which preceded it is a remarkable and wonderful one. Over a period of 100 years, Israel had returned from exile in Babylon and had established themselves according to the promises of God. Jerusalem was once again the joy of the whole earth, as we read in Psalm 48 verse 2. Gradually, amid much opposition, the land had been reoccupied, the temple rebuilt, the community made subject to the word of God, Jerusalem's walls had been rebuilt, and the city and the land repopulated. The return from the exile had been what the prophets had promised, a new exodus. Yet the story ends in anticlimax. The glory of the temple never equaled that of Solomon's, and did not enjoy the Shekinah glory at its dedication. The city was still a poor copy of what it had once been, the people a mere shadow of their past glories. The land was occupied by a remnant and was under the rule of pagan kings. There was no one to occupy the throne of David, and though the people had become the people of the book, they were still spiritually and morally weak, as chapter 13 showed us. So the story of Nehemiah ends with a tension between the promises of God, see for example Ezekiel 40 to 48, Isaiah 40 to 62, Zechariah as a whole, and especially Genesis chapter 12 verses 1 to 3, and the experience of the people in the days of Ezra and Nehemiah. It encourages the reader then to look forward further to the final fulfillment of all the promises of God, and not until Jesus came were they fulfilled. Thus Jesus broke the power of sin, as Romans chapter 8 verses 3 and 4 eloquently states it, and as it is referred to in Jeremiah chapter 31 verses 31 to 34. And Jesus did this, secondly, by bringing to an end all the Old Testament rituals which had pointed forward to his great work. This is the point that is made in the Epistle to the Hebrews in chapters 7 to 10. And he established permanent forgiveness, as Hebrews chapter 9 verses 11 to 15 emphasizes, and provided a better access to God, as both Hebrews chapter 4 verses 14 to 16 and Matthew chapter 27 verse 51 emphasize. Thirdly, Jesus' kingdom was greater than that of David, who speaks of him as great David's greater son. Jesus' kingdom was not of this world, as Matthew 12, 35 and 37 and John 18 and 36 stress. But it was a kingdom which began in his ministry, as Mark chapter 1 verse 4 states, and will finally one day be gloriously established, as we find referenced in Revelation chapter 11 verse 5. Fourthly, the land was but a shadow which pointed to the eternal rest in Jesus. Again, Hebrews emphasizes this in chapter 4 verse 1. And also pointed forward to the renewal of the world through him, as Paul states very clearly in Romans chapter 8 verses 18 to 22. Fifthly, Jerusalem itself pointed to the new Jerusalem, as we see when we compare Revelation chapter 21 verses 1 to 4 with Isaiah chapter 60 verses 11 and 13. And finally, believers in Jesus are described as the true temple in Revelation chapter 3 verse 12 and Ephesians chapter 2 verse 21, a true temple in whom the glory of God dwells, as Paul emphasizes in Ephesians chapter 1 and verse 4. And that presence of God is a guarantee of their final inheritance. So as those who have seen the fulfillment of all that Ezra and Nehemiah sought, may we prove worthy of our privilege in a devoted service to God, which is at the very least the equal of theirs.